So the Canon EOS R was released in 2018, and I personally bought it brand new in 2019, and I've used it extensively and still to this day continue to use it. I'm going to talk about a few things that I love about this camera, but also a few things after long-term usage that I really don't like about this camera. So if you're looking to jump from a DSLR system to a full-frame mirrorless system and you're with Canon, you've probably came across this camera, and hopefully by the end of the video, something I have said will help you decide whether or not this camera is a good purchase for you today or not. So let's talk about the things that I do love. I love the fully articulating screen. You can fold it flat at the back just like any other camera. You can flip it out to the sides, see the composition from this side if you wanted to vlog, or it really helps you get those angles up high, the angles down low. So I love this fully articulating screen, and I don't know why every camera today doesn't come out with this. This should be, in my opinion, a non-negotiable, and it should be a feature because it is super, super useful. The second thing I love is an EVF, which is an electronic viewfinder, which is in opposition to an optical viewfinder that DSLR systems have. So basically there's a screen inside the OVF, or where the OVF would be, and the cool thing about that with mirrorless is you get to see your exposure live. So you change the shutter on here, you're not having to guess or just rely on your exposure meter. You're literally seeing the screen inside your viewfinder change. So I really like the EVF. That was a really cool feature. Coming from a DSLR body, I enjoyed that upgrade. I've always been a Canon user. I picked up a Canon T3i used when I first started photography, and I've just slowly bought lenses, and so I'm pretty invested in the Canon lens ecosystem. So I love the autofocus that Canon cameras are synonymous with. There are other good manufacturers now with autofocus, but the Canon autofocus in this camera is great. Now, granted, there are better autofocus systems with newer mirrorless releases, but that also comes with a cost. So yeah, I do like this autofocus system. And the last thing that I really love about this camera is this little thumb slider, which was a very controversial thing when it first came out. People didn't really understand what it was or why it was there or what it could be useful for. And when I first started shooting video with weddings, I found that this was very helpful to set my white balance. And I still have this set to adjust my white balance. So at any given time, even shooting raw, I can change my white balance, my Kelvin on this slider, just like a literal slider. So that's what I've programmed this for. And I really like that button, even though it was a very non-liked piece of tech when it first came out. So those are a few things that I do like, but let's talk about some things that I don't like, because no tool is perfect, and this is no exception to that. I really hate the fact that this camera does not have a thumb rotating button dial. Hold on one second. You hear that? So this is my Canon 5D Mark III, which I'm probably going to make a video about this too. I still love this camera, but Canon cameras have had this rotating dial, which you can very efficiently move through menus. And for whatever reason, they elected to simply make this one just a directional D-pad. It doesn't spin, and so I miss that functionality. So I don't like that. I don't know why they took it away. Moving on to the next thing that I don't like about this camera is it doesn't have 2 card slots. And maybe that's not a deal breaker for some, but if you're someone who likes to be redundant, like wedding photographers or someone who literally just likes to CYA, it only has 1 SD card slot, so you don't have redundancy, and that can be a deal breaker for some people. And today, one of the things that I really dislike about this camera, and it's the reason why I basically only shoot photos with this camera anymore, is the video features. The video features when this first came out were pretty lackluster, and they've not obviously gotten any better. They've actually aged very non-gracefully, I would say. It shoots a nice 1080p codec, but the color profiles are just 8-bit. So if you know anything about color grading, or you have any desire to become a better colorist, you're probably quickly going to learn that working with 8-bit footage is not very fun, because the information simply is not there. So most cameras today will shoot a 10-bit codec for colors, but either way, the 8-bit codec in this camera is very, very limiting. The only way you can get 10-bit colors is if you shoot to an external recorder like an Atomos Ninja, and at that point, your file sizes are big, and you've got this HDMI cable and all those things, so yeah, it's not very good in the video department. So having heard the things that I like, the things that I don't like, if someone were asking me, would I recommend this camera today? The answer is yes, and the answer is also no. So what I mean by that is if you're someone who is wanting to be a dual threat or a hybrid shooter of sorts, offer photo services and video services, I don't think I would recommend this camera because I do think that there are better offerings for hybrid shooters. However, if you're a photographer and you're someone who's wanting to make the jump from DSLR to mirrorless, or someone who is simply going from maybe a crop sensor body to full frame, this is full frame and it is a mirrorless camera. So in those ways, it's definitely an upgrade in both cases. I definitely think that it's a more than capable photography's camera. Basically, if you're a photographer, this camera will still do great work for you. In fact, I use it professionally on a daily basis. Between it and my 5D Mark III, that's the cameras that I use. Now, I am looking to upgrade those in the very near future, but it's just one of those things where, you know, like Lil Wayne said, if it ain't broke, don't break it. And these cameras work, and they work very well. So one thing to note, this is a Canon RF mount as far as the lenses are concerned, and so that means that if you've got a bunch of EF glass, which is the line of glass Canon's been making for decades, you're going to need to buy an RF to EF adapter. Now, anytime you're adapting lenses, specifically if you want connectivity with autofocus and the connections and focus motors, all those things, if you want that to be good and fast, I would recommend buying the Canon branded. Now, there are third-party brands and makers out there that people have had great success with, but if I'm needing this camera's autofocus system to be trusty between the body and the lens, I figure the person who made the camera and the lens is probably the best person to translate those two things. So you may want to pick up an RF to EF adapter. I have, and it works great. It'll definitely save you a few bucks versus having to upgrade to RF glass. Because if you've looked at the prices of that stuff, they're not cheap. So to recap, this camera is 31 megapixels, which is more than sufficient. There's actually new cameras out today that aren't 31 megapixels. You get great Canon colors, you get great autofocus, and you just get a camera that is great for photography. So yes, I would recommend buying this camera. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and hopefully something I said has helped you make a decision. Whether you do buy or don't buy doesn't matter to me, but hopefully I've helped you in that decision in some way. Right now, I can find this body for $1,100, sometimes cheaper based upon condition. But if I'm gonna buy a used body, which I bought most of my gear used with the exception of this camera and one other, I think, I like to buy from reputable sources like KEH or MPB. Or if you're gonna go with eBay, make sure that you're buying from a camera dealer as opposed to, you know, somebody who's just selling a camera one-off. You're running a risk, that's all I'm saying. Now, I've bought camera gear and I've sold camera gear, but I say all that to say you're always safe buying from a reputable dealer on eBay and or a reputable source like KEH or MPB. Stick around if you would like to see more from me in the future. You don't have to, that's completely up to you, but I'd appreciate it if you did. And on that note, keep shooting, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. And I know it's not a new camera. In fact, it was released back in 2000 and this is full frame, and it is so would I recommend using, so having heard the things that I like,